Juan Domingo Perón was born on October 8, 1895, in Lobos, Buenos Aires Province, Argentina, to Mario Tomás Perón and Juana Sosa, of modest Italian and Spanish-Argentine background, and his early years were shaped by rural life, family instability, and Argentina's fragmented social classes, though his birth was technically out of wedlock, which carried stigma in conservative Argentina. Perón grew up resilient and ambitious, showing early signs of discipline and leadership. Enrolling at age 16 in the National Military College, he graduated in 1913 and began a military career that exposed him to both the inner workings of state power and Argentina's deep class divides. As he rose through the ranks, he served in Patagonia, where he witnessed the 1921 suppression of striking workers known as the Patagonia Rebellion, a brutal moment that profoundly influenced his later populist rhetoric. He pursued advanced military studies and traveled to Europe in the 1930s as a military attaché, spending time in Italy and Germany during the rise of fascism, and closely observing Benito Mussolini's methods of mass mobilization, corporatist organization, and charismatic leadership, all of which would influence his later policies, though Perón never fully embraced fascism ideologically. Upon returning to Argentina, he increasingly saw the nation's oligarchic rule and foreign-dominated economy as problems in need of drastic structural reform. His true ascent began with the 1943 military coup that overthrew the civilian government, after which he emerged as a key figure in the new regime, taking charge of the National Labor Department where he rapidly expanded workers' rights, unions, and social security, moves that made him immensely popular with Argentina's working class, the descamisados, shirtless ones, while also alarming conservative elites and liberal intellectuals who feared his demagogic style. By 1945, Perón held the powerful positions of Secretary of Labor, Vice President, and Minister of War, but tensions within the military regime led to his arrest in October of that year, which sparked a massive protest on October 17, when hundreds of thousands of workers flooded the Plaza de Mayo demanding his release, a moment enshrined in Argentine history as the birth of Peronism. Perón was released and soon swept the 1946 presidential election in a landslide, backed by a coalition of labor unions, nationalists, and working-class voters, promising social justice, economic independence, and political sovereignty. As president, he implemented sweeping reforms, nationalizing key industries like the railways and telephone systems, establishing a robust welfare state, increasing wages, improving labor laws, investing in housing and healthcare, and launching the five-year plans modeled loosely on statist economic systems. Under his leadership, Argentina became a beacon of social mobility for many of the working poor. Yet these reforms came at a cost. State spending soared, inflation crept in, and press freedoms diminished. Perón's government became increasingly authoritarian, silencing critics, jailing opponents, censoring the media, and building a quasi-personality cult around himself and his glamorous, beloved second wife, Eva Duarte, known affectionately as Evita, a former actress who became a powerful advocate for women's suffrage, labor rights, and the poor. Evita's unmatched charisma, her emotional bond with the masses, and her creation of the Eva Perón Foundation turned her into a quasi-saint among Argentines, but her rapid decline from cancer and death in 1952 devastated the nation and left Perón politically vulnerable, even as he was re-elected that year. Without Evita's balancing presence, Perón's relationship with the Catholic Church deteriorated. His promotion of secular education and divorce laws angered religious conservatives, and by 1955, economic woes, political repression, and public discontent boiled over. In September of that year, a military and civilian uprising known as the Revolución Libertadora ousted Perón from power. He fled into exile in Paraguay and later lived in Panama, the Dominican Republic, and finally Franco's Spain, all the while maintaining contact with Peronist networks in Argentina and building the mythos of his leadership. From abroad, Perón watched as successive Argentine governments struggled with instability, polarization, and economic decline, problems he blamed on the abandonment of his doctrine of justicialismo, a blend of social justice, nationalism, and economic independence. Despite being barred from politics for nearly 2 decades, Perón remained a powerful figure in Argentine life, writing, advising from abroad, and waiting for a moment to return. That moment came in the early 1970s, when Argentina again fell into chaos. Guerrilla warfare, inflation, and weak civilian governments set the stage for Perón's unlikely comeback. In 1973, after years of agitation, he was allowed to return and won the presidency once again at the age of 78, with his third wife Isabel Perón as vice president, ushering in a brief and turbulent final chapter. But the Argentina he returned to was vastly different. Radicalized youth, violent right-wing death squads, and deep economic instability challenged his ability to govern effectively. Though welcomed back as a grandfatherly figure, He was no longer the dynamic populist of the 1940s, and his third term was marred by escalating violence, factionalism within Peronism, and his failing health. On July 1, 1974, just 1 year after reclaiming the presidency, Juan Domingo Perón died of a heart attack in Buenos Aires, plunging Argentina into uncertainty. He left power to Isabel, who would become the world's first female president, and later be overthrown in a military coup that ushered in Argentina's darkest era of dictatorship. Perón's legacy remains deeply divisive. To some, he was the champion of the working class who broke the stranglehold of foreign capital and oligarchic rule. To others, he was a demagogue who undermined democracy, flirted with authoritarianism, and set Argentina on a path of economic decline. Yet the movement he created, Peronism, endures to this day as a central force in Argentine politics, a living testament to a man who fused nationalism, social justice, and personal power into a doctrine that still shapes the soul of a nation.